Welcome to Fairy Tale Nights, where magic and mystery come together to bring you enchanting bedtime stories. Tonight, we have a special tale just for you, The Forgotten Souls of Halloween. This story takes place in the village of Ashbourne, where a young woman named Eliza discovers that the ancient legends of restless spirits may be more real than she ever believed. As Halloween night approaches, she must confront the past and guide the lost souls to their peace. So, get cozy, lay back, and let yourself drift into this magical story. If you enjoy listening, I'd be so grateful if you could subscribe to the channel. We are growing our community, and your support means the world to me. Now, close your eyes and let's begin our journey into the heart of Ashbourne. In a village hidden deep within the ancient misty forests, there stood a small town called Ashbourne. The village, with its cobblestone streets, quaint cottages, and twisting ivy-covered towers, was known for its peace and quiet. But as the winds of autumn began to blow, Ashbourne transformed into a place of hushed whispers and quiet rituals. For the villagers all knew that with the arrival of October came the season of the Forgotten Souls, a time when the line between the living and the dead blurred, and the spirits of those long-lost returned to the village in search of rest. The legend of the Forgotten Souls had been passed down from generation to generation, a tale both feared and respected by the people of Ashbourne. It was said that many centuries ago, during a harsh and unforgiving winter, a great storm ravaged the town. Villagers, unprepared for such ferocity, were swept away by the winds, drowned by the rising rivers, and lost in the woods. So many perished that the survivors, overwhelmed by their grief, hurriedly buried their loved ones without performing the sacred rites to guide them safely to the afterlife. The souls of the forgotten dead, trapped between worlds, were doomed to wander Ashbourne, seeking the peace that had been denied them. Every year, on the night of Halloween, the villagers would leave their doors unlocked and place glowing lanterns on their doorsteps, inviting the spirits to pass through their homes and move on to the next realm. It was said that those who welcomed the souls with warmth and light would be blessed with a year of good fortune. But should anyone forget the tradition, or worse, lock their door against the spirits, they would suffer strange misfortunes and hauntings for the year to come. In the center of this village lived a young woman named Eliza, who, unlike her fellow villagers, did not believe in old superstitions or ghostly tales. She had lived her entire life in Ashbourne, in a cottage that had once belonged to her parents before they passed away. Eliza was practical, resourceful, and curious, traits that often set her apart from the more traditional villagers. Though she loved her town dearly, she couldn't help but roll her eyes at their yearly obsession with the Forgotten Souls. "I've lived here my whole life, and not once have I seen a spirit," she often told her friends, laughing softly as they nervously discussed the upcoming Halloween night. "You can laugh all you want, Eliza," her friend Miriam would say, "but it's best not to tempt fate. The spirits are real. Just because you haven't seen them doesn't mean they aren't there." Everyone knows the story of Old Thom, Eliza knew the story well, as it had been told to her since childhood. Old Thom was a man who had refused to believe in the tales of the forgotten souls. One Halloween night, decades ago, he had locked his doors, drawn his curtains, and ignored the village's warnings. The next morning, the villagers found his home in disarray, his belongings scattered, and old Thom himself vanished without a trace. They said his pride had led the spirits to claim him, and that he was now one of the restless souls who roamed Ashbourne on Halloween night. But to Eliza, it was nothing more than an old wives' tale, a ghost story meant to scare children into obeying tradition. Yet, as October deepened and the shadows lengthened in the woods, she couldn't deny the odd chill in the air. There was something about the autumn wind this year, something that made her feel uneasy in a way she couldn't quite explain. As Halloween approached, the village came alive with preparations. Eliza watched as her neighbors hung lanterns from their porches and carved pumpkins with wide, toothy grins. The baker sold sweet rolls shaped like ghosts, and the blacksmith crafted iron charms meant to ward off bad luck. Children ran through the streets in costumes, laughing and playing, while their parents whispered about the coming night and the rituals they would perform to keep the souls at peace. Eliza spent the day tending to her garden, the crisp air filling her lungs as she gathered the last of the season's herbs. She tried to shake off the odd feeling of dread that had settled in her chest. It was only a story, after all. There were no spirits, no curses, and no forgotten souls waiting to steal into her home. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the village, Eliza prepared her cottage for the night. She lit her hearth, the fire crackling warmly, and placed a kettle on to boil. Outside, the villagers were lighting their lanterns, their flames flickering in the evening breeze, creating a soft glow that bathed the village in a warm, golden light. Eliza stood at her window, watching as the village transformed under the light of the lanterns. She could see Miriam across the street, her face illuminated as she carefully placed her lantern on her doorstep. Eliza sighed. Despite her disbelief, there was something comforting about the tradition, about the way the village came together to honor the past. But even so, she couldn't bring herself to participate. With a shake of her head, she stepped away from the window and closed her curtains. She would not place a lantern outside her door. She would not leave her home unlocked for the souls of the dead to wander through. Tonight, she would prove once and for all that the legend of the forgotten souls was just that, a legend. As night fell and the village grew quiet, Eliza settled into her chair by the fire, a book in her hands. The warmth of the fire soothed her, and soon the eerie feeling that had plagued her all day began to fade. The wind howled softly outside, rustling the leaves in the trees, but inside her cottage, all was peaceful. Until, suddenly, it wasn't. The fire, which had been burning steadily moments before, flickered and dimmed, casting long, jagged shadows across the walls. A chill swept through the room, as though a window had been thrown open. But when Eliza stood to check, she found everything sealed tight. She shivered, wrapping her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Just the wind," she muttered to herself, though her voice trembled. But then she heard it soft at first, like a distant whisper. It grew louder, filling the room with a low, mournful sound, like the wail of 100 voices carried on the wind. Eliza's heart raced as she spun around, her eyes scanning the room for the source of the noise. The shadows on the walls seemed to shift and move, stretching longer and darker until they almost seemed to take shape. And then she saw them. Figures pale and translucent emerged from the shadows, their faces blank, their eyes hollow. They floated silently through her cottage, their forms flickering like candle flames. Eliza's breath caught in her throat as she watched them, her body frozen in place. These were not the spirits of children's tales, the kindly souls seeking rest. These were forgotten, lost, and angry. One by one, the spirits turned toward her, their empty eyes locking onto hers. Eliza backed away, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never believed the stories, never thought the spirits were real. But now, standing before them, she knew she had made a terrible mistake. The spirits drifted closer, their presence filling the room with a bone-chilling cold. Eliza's mind raced, trying to remember what the villagers had always said about the souls, how they needed light to guide them, how they needed to be welcomed, not feared. She had no lantern, no offering of light, but maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late. In a panic, she grabbed the nearest candle from her mantle and lit it, the small flame flickering weakly. She held it out toward the spirits, her voice trembling as she spoke. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know." The spirits paused, their hollow eyes fixed on the flame. For a moment, the air seemed to still, the oppressive weight of their presence lifting ever so slightly. But it wasn't enough. The candle's light was too small, too weak to guide them. They needed something more. Eliza's mind raced as she searched the room for something, anything that could help. And then she remembered. In the attic, tucked away in an old chest, was her mother's lantern. It had been years since she had last seen it, but she knew it was there. Without hesitation, Eliza bolted for the attic, her footsteps echoing through the silent house. She climbed the narrow stairs, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she reached the top. The attic was dark, filled with old furniture and forgotten trinkets, but she knew exactly where to look. She threw open the chest, her hands trembling as she pulled out the old brass lantern. It was tarnished and dusty, but still intact. With shaking hands, she placed the candle inside and lit the lantern, its warm glow spreading across the attic like a beacon. The moment the lantern was lit, the atmosphere in the house shifted. The air grew warmer, and the oppressive presence of the spirits seemed to fade. Eliza hurried back down the stairs, holding the lantern high as she entered the main room. The spirits were still there, hovering in the shadows, but their anger had lessened. They turned toward the light of the lantern, their hollow eyes softening as they floated toward it. One by one, they passed through the glow of the lantern, their forms fading into the light until they were gone. Eliza stood in the center of the room, her heart pounding as the last of the spirits disappeared. The fire in the hearth crackled back to life, casting a warm glow across the cottage. The chill in the air faded, replaced by a sense of calm. She had done it. She had guided them. The next morning, As the first light of dawn broke over the village, Eliza stepped outside her cottage, the brass lantern still in her hand. The village was quiet, the streets empty save for the soft glow of the lanterns that still flickered on doorsteps. The villagers emerged from their homes, their faces filled with relief as they realized the night had passed without incident. Miriam rushed over to Eliza, her eyes wide with concern. "Eliza, you didn't put out a lantern last night. Are you all right?" Eliza smiled softly, holding up the brass lantern. "I found my mother's lantern," she said. "It was enough." Miriam stared at her in disbelief. You saw them, didn't you? The souls?" Eliza nodded. "I did. And they're at peace now." The story of Eliza's night spread quickly through the village, and from that day forward, the people of Ashbourne treated her with a new kind of respect. She had faced the forgotten souls and guided them to rest, proving that even the most skeptical among them could find a way to honor the past. In the years that followed, Eliza became known as the Lantern Keeper, and every Halloween, she would light her mother's brass lantern and place it at the center of the village square. The villagers would gather around, their own lanterns in hand, and together they would watch as the soft glow of the lanterns filled the night, guiding the spirits of the forgotten souls to their final rest. And so, the village of Ashbourne continued its tradition, not out of fear, but out of love and respect for those who had come before. For in the end, it wasn't the spirits they feared, it was forgetting the ones who had been lost. And that brings us to the end of the forgotten souls of Halloween. Just like Eliza learned to face her fears and guide the lost spirits to peace, we too can find ways to confront the challenges in our own lives, even when they seem overwhelming. Sometimes it's about trusting the light within us to lead the way, just like the lanterns in our story. Thank you so much for listening tonight. If you enjoyed this tale, I would truly appreciate it if you could subscribe to Fairy Tale Nights. Your support helps us continue sharing these magical stories with more listeners. And if you'd like to relax a little longer, feel free to stay tuned. The calming music will play on, perfect for drifting deeper into your dreams. I look forward to seeing you again for our next adventure. Sweet dreams and good night.